So welcome everybody. Today's topic, we're going to look at the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. They're those problems that we talk about, the problems with motivation and the problems with connecting with other people. And they really are a set of symptoms or experiences that people can have that are really overlooked. It's really easy to pay attention to hallucinations and delusions, right? They're just right in your face. People see them. They're really dramatic. And it's really easy for us to miss the negative symptoms, right? Those problems of motivation and problems with connection, which is why we thought it's really going to be a nice opportunity to jump in and take a very close look at them and how we can both understand the negative symptoms and really start to develop a series of strategies to undermine them. We're going to talk about the reason why looking at them is going to be so important. So we're going to look a little bit at the research, we're going to look a lot at the strategy, and at the end of it, we'll obviously have time for questions. Again, my name is Dr. Aaron Brinen. I'm an assistant professor at the College of Medicine at Drexel College of Medicine in the Department of Psychiatry, where I have the privilege of leading a center where we do recovery-oriented cognitive therapy and disseminate it all over the world and continue to develop it. It's really been one of the exciting things of my life is getting to participate in the development of recovery-oriented cognitive therapy. So the purpose of today, we're really going to focus in on making sure we get the nitty-gritty formulation of negative symptoms, really making sure that we understand it. And then we're going to look at what are some nice strategies to undermine them. These are those, whenever you go, I've tried everything and the person it's still not working with this person, usually the best thing you can do is start thinking about, okay, where are the negative symptoms for this person? What's going on with this person's negative symptoms? And so it was a good guess that that's where the culprit is, or at least that's what I always guess. So what and why, right? So what are they? They're a series of, a great way to think of it is it's a reduction in goal-directed activity, motivation, and expression. That's sort of very technically feel. The way I like to think of it is it's really problems with motivation to engage in activities, and it's also a problem with connecting with other people, right? It's either a reduction in the ability or just there's something getting in the way of it. Which if you think about not being motivated to engage in activity and not connecting with other people, most things that you want to do in life get really hard if you have a reduction in the ability to connect with other people and a reduction in the motivation to engage in activity. It's important to think about them because, as I was really alluding to, is that they're overshadowed by psychosis. We don't really pay attention to them. It's because just from like a brain standpoint or like a behavioral standpoint, it's really hard to notice when something's missing. We're not designed to notice the absence of something. We're designed to notice the presence of something. And so that's where these labels positive and negative symptoms come from. A lot of times people believe that positive means good and negative means bad, but it really comes from this behavioral history of that positive return meant to the addition of something and negative meant the removal of something. So the positive symptoms, things like hallucinations and delusions, it's where something shouldn't be, it is. We've added an experience to somebody. And the negative symptoms are where something should be, it is not. It's been removed. So that's things like motivation, connecting with other people, feeling things, those are removed. So that's why we call them the negative symptoms. So they're really likely to be overshadowed by psychosis. If somebody's telling me that they're hearing their mom yelling at them and telling them how bad they are, I'm gonna go, whoa, let me see, tell me more about that. If somebody says, I know that the FBI is outside of my window and they're trying to kill me, I'm gonna go, whoa, hold on, tell me more about that. And so I'm really gonna be drawn into that. I'm not going to be that drawn into this idea of I don't want to get out of bed or I'm good. When I ask them to do, when we talk about doing something, they're like, I'm fine. And then I'm going to get into, oh, is it because people are outside your door? No, I'm fine. Oh, is it because you hear your mom yelling at you? No, I'm fine. I'm not going to pay attention to the fact that that is like a raging symptom. And so they're really sort of an interesting comparison. When hallucinations and delusions rage out, which is, of course, a technical term of assessment, rage out, When hallucinations and delusions rage out, they're loud, people are terrified. When negative symptoms rage out, a person just doesn't return your phone call. When they are completely acute and stronger than they've ever been, they don't get out of bed. So it's hard to pay attention to that. Whereas hallucinations and delusions, they get your attention when they really rage out. So oftentimes, both the individuals, families, even providers, we mistaken these symptoms for depression and laziness. So I can't tell you how many times I've been on supervision calls and somebody says, oh, this guy's really depressed. And I go, okay, yeah, so he's depressed. So is he feeling sad? Is he tearful all the time? And people go, no. I said, is it more like somebody yanked the batteries out of him? They're like, yeah, that's it. And so those are the negative symptoms. Those aren't depression. Depression is categorized by like sadness and low mood and tearfulness. Sure, there's problems with motivation and things like that, but those are they're sort of knock-on effects of the primary problem of sadness and tearfulness and low mood. And so really, the negative symptoms are sort of an absence of mood. They're an absence of motivation. And so a great way of thinking about it is it that the person's batteries have been yanked out, or is it that they're really sad and tearful? Are they feeling hopeless about the future? Things like that. And so that's the differentiation between depression. The other thing, and this is something that's really hurts my heart, is that oftentimes individuals start seeing themselves as, they'll even say, listen, Dr. Brinen, you seem really cool, man, but like, I'm lazy and I know I'm lazy. And so they see themselves as these bad, people because they're lazy. And their families go, I don't know what happened to little Aaron. He used to be so great, but now he's just so lazy. He lays around, he doesn't do anything. He's just such a lazy guy. And especially if you take somebody who was a real go-getter, maybe they were really good at sports, maybe they were great academically, and now they have these negative symptoms which sap their energy, and they see themselves as lazy. It's like the falling down from Olympus, right? Like they've just lost all of the magic that they used to have. So it's almost a further fall down that they have, and so really helping people know that it's an actual experience that they're having. It's a nice thing because this is one of those times when people go, well, when do you do psychoeducation? A lot of times I find that I'm doing a little bit more psychoeducation about these symptoms over some of the other symptoms, because people just say, well, listen, there's nothing I can do. I'm just a lazy, I'm a lazy punk. Why would I, there's nothing I can do. And I go, yeah, maybe not. But, there's this whole set of symptoms called the negative symptoms, stupid name, but this is what they are. And I lay it out for someone. They go, really? The interesting thing about the negative symptoms is this. Does anybody on here know the effect of medication on the negative symptoms? Do they make them, do they help make them go away? You are correct. No, they do not make them go away. In fact, do the medicines make the negative symptoms better or worse? They actually make them worse. You're correct. And so the medicines can actually have that impact of actually exacerbating these very symptoms that the individual is having. And so that's why we need a different approach and a different treatment for it. So I grew up, a little bit about my history. I grew up as a negative symptoms boy. When I came to schizophrenia, I learned about the negative symptoms first. So first, second, third, 83rd, the first thing I'm always the number one thing I'm always looking for is assessing and ruling out the negative symptoms in the individuals that I serve. So the reason why, though, is if we think about problems with motivation and problems with connection, right? When you're not connected to other people and you're not doing anything, it leaves a lot of time for all of these other symptoms we're trying to tackle. Increased distressing voices, worry and persecution, stress, people taking less information. So actually, not only are these a problematic symptom, we're going to talk about why, they actually make the other symptoms worse. They create fertile ground on which the other symptoms can grow. So there's also some really interesting research that all this research has come out since I started my work in in schizophrenia and psychosis. Because we used to say in workshops, listen, nobody ever got hospitalized for the negative symptoms. And then we found out we were wrong. So this is an interesting study where they found that the negative symptoms are actually much more prevalent than we think of. They actually use this automated method of looking through records. And they found that we weren't diagnosing, or we weren't sort of labeling somebody as having negative symptoms, but it was very clear that they had negative symptoms. Also, that those negative symptoms were associated with worse functioning, with the worst quality of life. So they were actually much more prevalent, and they had much more of an effect on the person. This study comes out and actually shows that the negative symptoms are more associated with rehospitalization over hallucinations and delusions, and over sort of the problems with memory and attention and executive planning that they call the neurocognition. And so it was a really interesting thing, because you'd think that hallucinations and delusions would get somebody back into the hospital, but it wasn't the case. What they found is that the negative symptoms at discharge predicted rehospitalization, or actually more predicted how much time the person stayed in the community. And a really recent study looked at that the negative symptoms at discharge, actually predicted higher level of care over the next year, right? And so what they found is that the people with more negative symptoms they went back into the hospital more. They went into state hospitals. They had time in group living environments that were really expensive. So it's actually an expensive symptom, and that the people are not moving forward in their life as a result. So the work that Dr. Beck started to do with his group at Penn is to start translating these negative symptoms. And the reason that we needed to translate these negative symptoms really came down to, they were always just thought of as like holes in the head. They used to call it holes in the head schizophrenia, right? Or deficit syndrome, or things like that. That essentially, once you had the negative symptoms, all the king's horses and all the king's men weren't going to put you back together again. You were done. And so what Dr. Beck starts to do is he goes, based off of some really interesting hypotheses that he had heard, he did what he always does, is he sent people out to interview these individuals who had these experiences. And just like he did in depression and anxiety and all of, and suicidality and all the things that he studied, he found that there were a predictable set of beliefs, right? These things that people were telling themselves that predicted, that impacted the symptoms. And so he found that for avolition, the problems with motivation, that individuals had the sense of being defeated. Why try? It's not going to work out anyway. And that they also had this belief that they couldn't do things until they got the energy. And we're going to talk about each of these symptoms, each of these belief sets. Also for this, problems with connection, that not wanting to connect with other people, he found that people had these asocial beliefs or social disinterest beliefs. They didn't see that there was a value in socializing with other people. For anhedonia, he found, we find that those individuals just don't expect to enjoy things. So individuals with schizophrenia can actually experience pleasure at the same level as normals do, but they just don't anticipate experiencing pleasure. So they kind of figure, well, why do it? There's no point. It's not going to be fun anyway. And so whereas in depression, you actually can have a deficit in your ability to experience pleasure. In schizophrenia, you actually can experience pleasure. And then alogia, that not wanting to talk so much, again, that symptom gets worse over the course of an individual's illness. And so one of the things we started to realize is it really has this sense of they're learning the lesson that people don't want to hear what I have to say anyway, so why talk? And so they don't expect that people will listen, so they don't end up talking as much. So the conservation of energy belief, right? And so this is the idea of I can't do it until I get the energy. How many people, you can hit the little raise your hand button. How many people have heard an individual say, I can't do it until I get the energy? Has anybody ever had an individual say that to them? Okay, awesome. And so, and what that leads to, it leads to sort of inactivity, lowered motivation, right? So people don't end up doing these things. And what happens is, think about it. Have you ever just sort of laid around a little bit longer? Does your energy go up or down? Right, it goes down. But where this comes from is it's actually a defensive belief. These individuals see themselves in this constant state of danger and rejection from the tribe. And so as a result, they need to make sure that they have the energy in case they need to protect themselves. So what happens is they're in this constant state of conserving energy, but because they're not exerting energy, they never get more energy. So when they come back around, they go, how's it going? Their energy has gone down. So when their energy has gone down a little, they go, oh my goodness, see, this is really bad. I need to conserve my energy more. And so they end up in this horrible cycle of conserving their energy going down, trying to conserve their energy more, it going down more, and around they go. That leads us to the other one. It's this conservation, it's this set of beliefs that we call the defeatist beliefs or defeatist performance beliefs. Individuals really hold on to this sense of why try, it's not gonna work out anyway. A little mistake is as bad as a complete catastrophe, the sense that they're broken. And so if you think about it, think about if you have a queue on your electronic medical records of notes to do. Imagine telling yourself right now, why try? I'm never going to get through them anyway. Does your motivation go up or down to do those notes? Right, they go down, right? You feel like, oh, why try? I'm never going to get through them anyway. And so as a result, you're less likely to engage in doing it. And so then you're unsuccessful. But there's a psychologist out of San Diego, a guy named Eric Granholm, and he did this really interesting study where what he did is he used a pupillary response. So your pupils dilate when you exert effort. And so what he did is he measured what's called pupillary response, how much your pupils dilated. And he had them do just a simple task that required a little bit of effort, and it becomes more and more effort. It's called digit span forward. And essentially, all digit span forward is I ask you to repeat back 3 digits, right? 5, 7, 9, you go 5, 7, 9, and then they add 1 digit on as it goes forward. So 3 digits is no big deal. It's pretty easy, right? 4 digits is a little bit of effort. By the time you get to like 6, 7 digits, it's making your brain work. And so the hypothesis really of avolition is that people don't exert any effort. But what Granholm finds is that the individuals with the defeatist beliefs, right, that's this group here, they all exert some effort initially. But what happens is where the healthy controls continue to exert effort, right, the individuals with defeatist beliefs sort of poop out earlier. They stop exerting energy earlier. And so what happens is they're in this actual constant state of putting out effort and then failing. So it really reinforces that idea of why try, it's not going to work out anyway. Because for any of us to be successful, we need to push in just enough effort to get over the hump and then be successful. And that's not what the individuals that we're serving are doing. And that brings us to the expectation of pleasure. It won't be fun, so why try? And so what they do is they avoid activities, but then they conclude, see, going out for a walk with my family wasn't going to be fun anyway. And so the next time it comes along, they go, well, it wasn't fun to do it last time, so why do it this time? And so they end up in this cycle of believing that it's not going to be fun, so they don't engage in it. So when they don't engage in it, they conclude it wasn't fun. So the next time there's an opportunity, they believe that it isn't going to be fun. That gets us to the beliefs around connection, right? This is the sort of social disinterest beliefs, right? Time with others isn't worth the effort. So what individuals do is they avoid socializing. Another interesting study that came out of Granholm's lab really talks about this idea of these beliefs actually impact your ability. So if I have high social disinterest beliefs, I'm actually less likely to be successful, even if I'm good at socializing. Even if I have decent social skills, I'm going to be less likely to be successful in socializing and being social with other people. So these asocial beliefs have a really strong impact. They sort of move the rudder of the ship before the ship takes off. think that was a very specific metaphor. So little nautical metaphor for people on Friday. So when we're thinking about the negative symptoms, and we've talked about this before, is that the negative symptoms also really present a real difficulty in the engagement into therapy altogether, right? Because to do therapy, you need to sort of engage with the therapist, have this desire to connect, and this willingness to connect, and this willingness to be motivated, and then you do therapy. And what the negative symptoms do is those problems with motivation and problems with connection sit squarely over over one of the critical pieces to move forward. And so when we're doing things with telehealth, anytime we sort of activate that idea of things aren't going to work out anyway, I'm broken, any way that we're really talking with the individual as a patient, right? And that's going to include asking those questions early on about medicines, asking those questions about hygiene and groups and stuff like that. Any of those types of things are really going to stoke up this idea of I'm broken. See, time with other people isn't worthwhile. I mean, how many times have you ever gone to your primary care physician and the primary care physician asks you whether you're exercise, you walk in the door and they go, have you been exercising? Have you been eating, low fat foods? Have you been watching your salt? And you're like, oh, this is going to be the worst. Right? That's the way that we have that reaction. And so our individuals will be the same way. If we pull up the screen and go, hey, did you take your medicine today? They're going to be like, oh, this is the worst. The difference is when we're at our primary care physician, we don't have these beliefs primed that are going to make us just, turn it off. But our individuals have this set of beliefs that are going to make them more likely to disengage. So anything that feels really formal, real therapizing them, individuals are going to reject and move away from. So we need to circumnavigate that experience. So this really gets us to, how do we do that? What are some of the strategies? And I think we're going to focus in on sort of 3 key strategies today. We might throw in a 4th one just for giggles together. And so the strategies are really fall along the continuum of the CTR protocol, right? So obviously that activation, that drawing out the individual, and that's going to be some of those things that just is really going to light somebody up, make them feel very much like a person. Aspirations, those personal, meaningful, valued aspirations, the things we want in our lives, and then really looking at the action piece as well. So in activating the adaptive mode, we've talked about this before, about that there's lots of ways to do it. And if you really think about those times when you've worked with an individual and then all of a sudden you find you're not getting anywhere, but then you just ask them about like sports, or you show them a picture of some bread that you baked, or you you ask them, what's the best way to make sweet potatoes, any of those types of things, the person sort of comes to life. This individual who was previously giving you 1- and 2-word answers, now all of a sudden is giving you a long dissertation on the way to beat, the next level in Call of Duty. And you're sort of like shocked by it, but still it doesn't make it any worse along the way. And so the first strategy that we're really going to look at is a strategy that revolves around helping somebody see the value of connecting. And that's really where that's really where activation shines initially. So the activation provides an individual with an experience, right? That there's a value in connecting with other people. So if I, as an individual, see there's no value in connecting with other people, so why try? But I spent some time with Pise on the phone, and we're talking about, we're trading recipes back and forth, and he's, giving me some ideas of other types of recipes that I could look up. That's fun. That's valuable. For the people who really like cooking on there, how many people would love to just sit and trade recipes back and forth with somebody for, 5-10 minutes, right? And so all of a sudden, I start seeing that there's a value, but it's, in that way, as Pise is doing that with me, he's really sort of circumnavigate. He's sort of like doing an end run around the symptom that's blocking us from connecting. Because I want to talk about recipes, right? People who love sports, they want to talk about sports. And so all of a sudden, I have this experience. I have this experience that it's really enjoyable to do that. It's this experience that's just a little bit different. And so the lesson at the end of it is, wow, that was more fun than we thought it was going to be. I wonder if other times would be fun too. Or, hey, next time, I really want to learn about, this kugel that you make. Can you tell me about it? And so the next time we see, one time is a fluke, 2 times is a curiosity, 5 times that we do this, well, maybe something's different in the way that I see time with other people isn't worthwhile. So this is a version of a behavioral experiment when essentially we're defining the behavioral experiment as the behavioral experiment is happening, right? So we're sort of like sneaking all of the parts to make a behavioral experiment inside the castle, and then we build it all of a sudden while it's in there. But it's really this experiential way of learning that time with other people is worthwhile. And if you really think about it, even if we're doing something like simple gifts, right, where I help the person, simple gifts, where I help the person sort of learn a skill, learn something to deal with, say, voices or stress. I guess time with other people is worthwhile because I can learn things. If we're talking about my aspirations, I love talking about, the things that I want to do, right? The things that I'm excited about in the future. I'll talk to you guys about the bread I'm going to make later. I'll talk to you guys about the research I want to do. I could talk your ear off. And so all of a sudden, it's really fun to be around other people. And so it's this idea of helping people learn the lessons that they want to learn. So that leads us, once we've got the idea of doing some of these activation pieces, we want to sort of take those activities and schedule them into the week. So if we listen to music together and that was pretty fun, maybe it's worth it to listen to music other times during the week. If the 2 of us sit and have coffee together, well, who else are you going to have coffee with? If the 2 of us go for a walk together, when else do you want to go for a walk together? You don't have to just wait for me, right? If a little's good, a lot's better, right? It's the ice cream, it's the ice cream eater's mantra. And so the reason we're going to do this, I guess this is sort of intervention, strategy 1.5, right? Is that as individuals are doing more on a regular basis, they have increased access to motivation. Their brains sort of clear up a little bit, right? It's sort of, it's the difference between talking to somebody right after they wake up versus talking to somebody who's been awake for a little while. When my family comes downstairs and they see me, because I get up pretty early, I've drank my coffee, I've done some work, I've hung out with the dog. They're walking down and they're exhausted and I'm ready to chat because the only person I've been able to talk to is Bonnie for like 3 hours. So if an individual starts doing activity during the week, when we see them, it's going to be less like my family members who are coming down the stairs and more like me who's been drinking coffee and is ready to talk. And so it's really shifting that to increase access to the motivation. So then that gets us into this really basic idea of the principle behind conservation of energy. The idea is that inactivity leads to lower energy and lower motivation, but the opposite is actually true too. The increased activity leads to increased energy and increased motivation. And so the basic false belief that people develop is this idea of, I have to wait for my energy. I think I worked on this belief 3 or 4 of my sessions this week. It's such a chronic belief, and it's such a difficult belief too. And also, listen, one of my first episode teams that I was supervising yesterday said to me, I'll never underestimate the conservation of energy beliefs again, Dr. Brinen, because during the isolation, I'm having a lot of trouble getting up and going and doing these things that I want to do. And so what we want individuals to do is learn internally that when you do activity, it leads to increased energy. So that leads us to strategy 2. So we have strategy 1, 1.5, and now strategy 2. So strategy 2 is really this idea of the earlier you get your energy going, the more energy you get. The longer you wait to get your energy going, the more your bed acts as an energy vampire, right? Or energy kryptonite, whatever you want to think of it as. And so we need to get individuals to start thinking about the idea of getting started and getting started earlier. So if I wake up and I put my feet on the ground and I go and I get myself my cup of coffee and I go for a walk, at that point, I can decide to go back to bed or I can decide not to go back to bed, but my energy is going to get going. If I roll over and I just sort of check Facebook and I go on YouTube for a little while and I see what people have texted me, my energy goes down, right? And so what we want to help individuals start learning is get up and get going because there's a value in it, particularly in the morning, because that's going to contradict that conservation of energy belief and give us more motivation for other activities. So what we want to help individuals start to do is develop this morning routine. And the funny thing is we all have our version of a morning routine. So I want to go through, if you think about what a lot of the individuals we serve are told to do in the morning, right? A lot of those, think about it. I want you to think right now, what are the things that patients are told to do in the morning, right? Take their medicine, shower, yep, make their bed, wash their face, eat a healthy breakfast. Those are the things that all of the individuals get told to do. And I'm sure there's other stuff as well, right? For the individuals that we, for all of us, what are the things that you guys do that really get you going in the morning? Yep. Cup of coffee. Yep. A lot of people I know say prayer. Some people get music going. I have my time with Bonnie in the morning, which is really fun. So I get to feed her and do a little bit of training with her in the morning. Which of those would you prefer to do? Which of those would actually get you energized in the morning? The first one, take your medicine, all that stuff, or coffee, prayer, music, spend time with your pet. Right. The second one is going to get you energized. And the thing that we've got to remember is the individuals that we're serving, they're struggling with motivation, energy, and wanting to connect with other people. And that first version that they're prescribed all the time, really, it activates all of the beliefs around being, I'm broken, there's no point in trying, nothing's going to work out anyway, right? Other people just want to sort of put me down. And so actually that first schedule, it almost activates the very problem that we're trying to solve. Whereas on the flip side, our routines actually just are fun and it's about being human, right? I could, the number of workshops I've been to where everybody's hands shoot up and go, coffee is ridiculous. And so it's a real important thing for us to do is to really help people hypercharge it with fun stuff. I'll tell you right now, our individuals that we serve know that they're supposed to take their medicine. They're going to make sure it gets put in there. So in fact, if you come up with a whole routine with the individual, after trying some of these things out through activation, it'll be funny how many of the individuals I serve and they go, oh, after I get my coffee, I'll take my medicine, right? They're putting all that stuff in there, and not because they're trying to be good little patients, but they know what they have to do in the morning. So let's make sure we highlight the fun stuff, and then the sort of boring stuff gets in there. And so that's just sort of a real important piece that we can do. You can also make sure that you're planning for different symptoms. So if you have somebody who's more likely to get angry, you might do stuff that drains off the anger. If you have people who are likely to hear their voices, you might do stuff that makes it incompatible with hearing their voices, stuff like that. And so that gets us to the next lead into the strategy is that when we're talking about individuals' aspirations, those things that they want to be doing, the things that they want to get in their life, Aspirations are going to be this wonderful ongoing source of engagement, of activating the sense of like purpose. Imagine if my aspiration of spending time cooking with my kids, how, that's all encompassing. I'm always thinking and dreaming about those things, going for hikes in like the Smoky Mountains with my kids, right? If that's the thing I'm dreaming about, it's very exciting just thinking about those things in my mind. And so it becomes this ongoing source of engagement. It gives me more mental resources along the way. It also starts to counter some of the evidence of the defeatist beliefs. When I say, why try? It's not going to work out anyway. Well, man, if it's about taking my kids hiking in the Smoky Mountains, there's a really good reason to try, right? That's pretty powerful reason to try. The problem is that the excitement can also lead somebody to become overwhelmed. It can seem so far away, so distant, so impossible that they go, see, there's no point in trying. It's not going to work out anyway. I'm going to make one little mistake and the whole thing's going to be blown to smithereens. And so they might start to avoid or decline. They go, yeah, I really like that idea, but why try? It's never going to get there anyway. And so what we want to do is make it small, right? It's interesting. The aspirations we want big, but then the intervention is to make it super, super, super small for the individual. What are the micro actions and behaviors that the individual can do? It starts to counteract this idea of why try, it won't work out anyway. A little mistake is as bad as a complete catastrophe. If you go small, right? So let's think about taking my kids hiking in the Smoky Mountains, right? So that they can see the beauty of those mountains. One of the things we can do is go really big, right? Start planning the trip, looking at, start planning the trip, figuring out how much money I need to save. But for some individuals, that's going to seem like really far away, too big of a step to do. And so what I might do is just kind of break it down to the really, really, really small steps. That's what I mean when I say going small. So if I'm thinking about it, the first thing I might do is something really simple, like as small can be. Maybe what I'll do is open up, go on Apple Maps and look at where is it. The next thing I might do is just pull up the website for the state park of the Smoky Mountains and look at pictures online of it. And just really small steps that might get me a little bit motivated. Because I'm pretty sure, I don't feel super confident in myself, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to mess up Apple Maps. And even if I mess up Apple Maps, pulling up the Smoky Mountains and I find some other Smoky Mountains, they could be any, I'm sure I could fix that one, right? It's not going to be the end of the world if I mess up Apple Maps. Same thing if I don't get to the right website on, homepage, I can sort of fix that. Whereas if I'm trying to save up money, maybe it's going to go well, maybe it's not going to go well. But what those really small steps do is, one, you feel a little bit, you have concrete examples of the, what you start getting is concrete examples of times when you're successful. The next thing you start to do is it starts to sort of push you over the top because you get excited when you do those small things, right? Think about the last big trip that you wanted to go on. Do you have that in your mind? And now I want you to think about times where you may have like pulled up pictures, looked at the itinerary, all those things. Didn't that get you like really excited? Even if you had to like say pull an extra shift at work, right? Even if you had to stay at work really late to get all of your notes done before you could do that. In your mind, you had this like vision of going hiking, right? In your mind, you had all of these ideas. Even going on like Amazon and sort of putting on your wish list, all of the exciting things that you would need to go hiking in that way. Those are little things that you can just sort of peruse. And think about it. I think many of us do this normally. I can tell you for myself, when I was in grad school and I was working midnight to 8 a.m. admitting people to an acute hospital, one of the things I would do in the downtime, which there's not a lot of downtime in the middle of the night. If people think there is, there's not. But one of the things that I would often do is I would pull up the internship sites. Now, granted, I was in my first year in grad school, but I would still pull up the internship sites and I would just like look through them and I'd read through their rotations. And just so I could really sort of imagine it. And then I would go on their website and I would look at some of the other parts about the facilities. And I would do that over and over and over again. But you know what? When I had to like pull myself out of my house at 11:30 to drive to the hospital, I had a little bit more of a pep in my step, right? That's the reason why it's going to work out. There's these small, almost infallible steps, things you just can't mess up. So, but before we do that, the last part of it, and I kind of pulled this one out because I didn't think I'd have time, but I did. Who knows? All of you who know me very well, me being ahead of time is not usually my area of expertise. But the last one is this, and it really goes after this idea of alogia, right? This idea of people don't want to hear what I have to say, so why talk anyway? And one of the nice things that you can do when it comes to alogia is really help the individual notice that what they're saying is of value. And so that's really about reflective listening with a little bit of a boost going, man, that's neat, right? So let's say an individual talks about, their worries that they're going to go, trying to save up money that they're not going to be successful. If you reflect back, okay, cool. So what you're saying is you're really kind of worried that it's not going to work out. Thanks for letting me know. That's really helpful. And if they ever come up with an interesting idea going, let's say if the person says, I notice that when I'm doing more, I get more energy. Sort of the more you do, the better you feel. You go, that's a really cool way of saying it. And then hammering that over and over and over again. So you're slowly eroding this idea of others don't care what I have to say by helping them see the things that they say are quite valuable and are quite useful. And so it's sort of shifting the focus in that way. So a reminder, Monday we have no webinar. It's no webinar Monday. Like I said, I'll be giving a workshop for 3 days. So please wish me luck because I could use it. Then Friday, we're going to lead with one that came out of, it was a request from On My Way as well. Oh, no, it wasn't On My Way. It was a group in Utah. They asked for one, or maybe it's, I don't know, a bunch of different places said they'd love to do one. I'm calling it, I guess I'm pulling all of my names for these things off of popular culture. So if anybody remembers the old song, Get a Job. And so we're really going to focus in on, it's going to be one that's going to be really geared both toward clinicians as well as case managers, and really looking at sort of the job pursuit thing. And, people, how do we get people going to get a job? Once they get the job, how do we support them in it? For individuals who get to the job and feel overwhelmed and then, quit the job, things like that. So really thinking about sort of the nuts and bolts of jobbing and things like that. So that'll be Get a Job. Obviously, as Kat posts lovingly, you can watch the webinars at recoverwithcbt.com. You can get CEUs at Drexel's BHE. One of the things I found out, just to make sure I'm completely upfront, again, I don't benefit financially from this at all. All of them are up for CEUs. I think I'm like 4 behind on giving them new ones for CEUs. I do know that there's sort of 4 that are sort of like COVID specific, and those get free CEUs. And then the rest of them are going to be like, I think they're $10 a CEU, which I don't know if that's outrageous or not, but it sort of helps BHE cover the cost. I think they wanted to do it as a service, the free ones, and then the rest of them are just $10 per. So with that, again, my name is Dr. Aaron Brinen, and I'm from the Department of Psychiatry. So with that, I'm going to stop share. I mean, I'm never going to stop sharing.
I do have a quick question, Dr. Brinen. I know this is a little different, but especially with, I know we're not talking about like OCD. I know we're talking about more with like schizophrenic patients, but like with respect to those who overschedule, where the issue is not motivation, but it's like they're overscheduling, where it actually overwhelms them, where they feel like I got to take care of so many things. I'm juggling so many activities and all that. So how would you speak to making sure that they don't overschedule?
Okay. That's a really good question. So the question is about overscheduling. And so one of the things that you can actually notice, and this actually you can see this a lot with bipolar disorder as well, is that there's a group of people who will set like a really unrealistic, and I don't mean unrealistic as in a way, but like legitimately like unrealistic for me to accomplish. It's a way of meeting this need of, I've got to show people that I'm fine. And what happens is, in particularly in bipolar disorder, those individuals continue to exert themselves so strongly and try so hard that they really end up sort of like flaming out. And that will also oftentimes lead to a manic episode and a depressed episode as a result. So there's this way that they sort of shoot for the, there's the old saying, if you shoot for the moon, if you miss, at least you end up among the stars. They kind of burn up on not re-entry, but exit of the atmosphere. And so that's one of the things to focus in on. In avolition, and I'm going to get to the OCD part too, in avolition, what can oftentimes happen is essentially they, it's almost like if you go to if they went to the casino and they put one, they put one coin on everything at the roulette table. So they sort of underinvest in everything. So they end up losing in the end. So they're constantly putting in like $1 for every activity and aspiration and thing that they want to do, but they're not putting in enough to get any benefit. So they're sort of under engaging and then not being successful in the end. And then they go, see, I'm never successful. I guess I was right all along. And so that becomes a little bit of a problem. So one of the things is sort of just playing out sort of the pros and cons of that approach, saying, do you think it's helpful? I mean, I can see on the upside, if one of those hits, you're a winner. The downside is, you're kind of losing a lot to possibly get one win. And that's sort of in the under engagement part. The other part of it is, if you're successful and hit it, hit it as you're going out, that's great. But if you burn yourself out in trying to accomplish that, are you actually going to be successful? Do you actually win if you burn yourself out in the attempt to try to be successful? And then I think it just becomes a behavioral experiment. What if we try one thing and we don't overschedule or we don't overdo things, right? If it's really a true sort of OCD, like if I don't overschedule, people are going to die type thing, that gets into a very strict sort of exposure with response prevention thing. I think a simple, small behavioral experiment might not sort of carry the day. But if you're talking about that person who's feeling really compelled and driven in that way, I think a nice, simple behavioral experiment can help the individual sort of draw some of those conclusions. Sort of looking at, is that approach being helpful, and gathering and evaluating the data behind it. I'm sure there's like 5 examples that week of them overscheduling and trying really hard. And at the end of the day, they're frustrated. They're less effective. The other thing I'll sometimes do is I really need to go back and get all of these. There's all these fantastic, like they're totally like lame Facebook posts, but they're sort of like 50 solutions of successful CEOs, the top 10 behaviors of successful people. And they're all baloney, right? They're basically like mediocre to bad CBT, but they all talk about this idea of you need time to rest, right? So really successful people both schedule their time and they schedule what they want to do, but they also schedule time for rest. And there's all of this research out of Europe that, these people are really successful. And it's not because they're pushing themselves 800 hours a day. It really comes from the idea of just pacing yourself. I mean, I look at my colleagues in the UK and they went, Europe, what do you get? Like, 50 weeks of vacation and 2 weeks to work. And yet they're pumping out papers like beasts. Like they just like they're always publishing something. They're always finishing a study. And yet all of my friends are like, they're all on like, 2 weeks at a time of vacation. And so helping the individual notice, like, I know it feels better to push, but actually we know that you're going to be less successful in the long run. So if your fear is that you're not going to be successful if you don't do enough, you actually might be kind of accomplishing that in the opposite direction. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I appreciate that because I think a lot of times what you notice is true with a lot of my colleagues from Europe and so forth. I think there's this kind of old school idea of Sabbath keeping. A lot of people don't seem to um, appreciate the time of resting. I mean, resting to I don't know. I just feel like building. I guess I'm speaking for myself, and sometimes we're thinking like if I push through, that's going to produce more results. But there's a point where you're actually saying it's burning out more than actually it's producing.
Yep, absolutely. It's really true. I'll tell you. Do you know when I end up doing the most of my writing, and I produce the most material? It's usually after I have been on a vacation, taken the weekend, and sworn to my family that I'm turning everything off. Those are the times. Then all of a sudden, the next morning, I wake up. When I'm on vacation, all of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh, I'll read this article. That'll be fun." And I read like 5 articles. I like trash through a book. If you ever go on Twitter, you'll see like all of the pictures of me reading books that I want to read. They all happen when I'm like on a beach. And so that's when I'm more successful. Whereas when I put, like you said, when I try push, which I do too. Listen, I'm a dumpster fire, man. And when it comes to that behavior, but when I try to push, then I get burnt out. I'm on, I'm playing a video game, stuff like that. So
I appreciate that. Thanks for the feedback.
you're welcome. Again, I will see you guys Friday, hopefully, for Get a Job. Thank you so much. I love seeing the familiar names on here. Just please take care of yourself. Have a fantastic weekend. Try to choose something fun to do. Thank you as always, and thank you to sort of all of the partners in producing this webinar. Again, my name is Dr. Aaron Brinen from the Department of Psychiatry at Drexel College of Medicine, and I will see you guys soon. Be well, take care of yourselves, be compassionate with yourself this weekend.